So how do we use earthworks to help restore the local water cycle and what's a broken hydrological cycle? Hi, Mike Lynn with Eastern Ecosystems and United Designers International. I'm out here in Oregon with Zach Weiss of Water Stories and Elemental Ecosystems for a water stories intensive where we're using some earthworks and building a pond to help restore the broken water cycle that's here on a farm. So here we have a climate that has a rainy season during the winter months, more or less, and then a drier season during the summer. So early on, this area was farmed, and still is farmed, but what they did is put drain tile. And for those that aren't familiar with drain tile, back then it was terracotta pipes that were a little bit perforated. Nowadays it's plastic pipes, plastic perforated pipes. And if you're familiar with what a French drain is, it's similar to that. So they put that in these fields because we're in a floodplain here off to the left where you can't quite see it, but along those tree lines there's a creek. And so when they would try to farm this during the rainy season, it would be far too wet, so they drained it, and that served the agricultural purpose. But over time, and especially as I'll swing to the left there, you can see up on the top of the hillside, a lot of this area has been deforested, and then some of those mountains in the background been deforested for logging and timber. And so as the human land use changed, humans changed the land here, the landscape's beginning to dry out. And with climate change, shifting weather patterns, so now this area is too dry and there's a broken water cycle because rain hits, and instead of soaking in and recharging the groundwater, just hits that drain tile and runs out. So what Zach had planned, and out here learning with him and Water Stories, is how can we use some earthworks to help restore the cycle. So one thing is cutting through that drain tile. It's no longer going to drain the landscape, but as we look on the uphill side, this is a pretty large property and there's a lot of catchment that runs into what we are building here as a pond. And I'm standing on the dam wall for that pond. And so what this will do, now this is going to be an ephemeral pond, and depending on what your goals are, whether it's farm irrigation or water landscape rehydration, may change how you do things differently. But as we look here, what this is going to do is that water is going to run down. There's going to be a swale coming down this way, not a swale, apologies, a terrace coming down this way, and then another terrace coming down that way. That's going to feed water into this. Now, like I said, this is going to be an ephemeral pond or a seasonal pond, but while it's filled, that pond is going to soak water back into the landscape. So we have really good clay here. This is going to hold a lot of water, but eventually it's going to evaporate and soak in. So the goal here is to recharge the groundwater. So one, instead of the rain hitting and running, would be right before this pond and going off into that stream, now it's going to hang out here and soak into the landscape. Now that's going to be fantastic for wildlife. The owner here that's doing the farming isn't particular in need of irrigation, so this pond will be mainly used for wildlife and to recharge the groundwater. But there are use cases where you can use it for irrigation too. That way you don't have to pump the groundwater, and while it sits here, it still recharges the groundwater. So that's the short version of it. If you want to know more, feel free to reach out. easternecosystems.com is where you can find me. And if anybody's interested in learning more about this, I highly recommend the Water Stories course. I'm a big fan of that, and there's different levels of that. So whatever your interest level is, either as an advocate or as a practitioner, to learn how to build something like that, check it out. Thanks for watching.